Hello everyone, I'm Nico and I'm currently teaching English in Beijing, China.
Hi, I'm Roxy. I'm an online English teacher and I teach children from all over the world.
Hello everyone, good to see so many of you here. My name is Mairead O'Connor and I am currently in Galway in the west of Ireland. It is technically summer, but as usual Ireland doesn't know that and it's very wet and windy today. So if you'd like to take a moment to just pop in the chat box where you're watching us from today, I'd be really interested to know. Okay, well, you're all a bit quiet at the moment, but that's okay. We'll warm up. So, oh, hello South Africa. Hello New York and Iran. Oh goodness, how interesting. Really lovely to see you all today. As you know, today we are going to talk about teaching vocabulary. Now, I'm sure some of you who have already started the online content will be familiar with some of this, but if you're not, that's okay too. Hopefully it'll either be a very interesting introduction or a very welcome recap. Okay, let's go. So when you start teaching vocabulary, you'll notice that you will probably learn some new words yourself along the way. In teaching methodology books and in lesson plans, we don't tend to use the word vocabulary so much. Instead, we use the technical term lexis. So lexis basically means words and phrases. Okay, anything to do with vocabulary is lexis. It also has the adjective lexical. So if you do come across that word, it basically means vocabulary. When we're teaching vocabulary, we end up teaching a lot of things. We teach individual words, we teach phrases. For example, it's up in the air. Yeah, my plan is up in the air. Or it happens once in a blue moon. Okay, so you see they're not individual words, they're more phrases. We also teach a lot of collocations. If you haven't seen this word before, a collocation is a set of words that go together. For example, if I say make, what do you think of? You probably think make a cake, make the bed, make a decision. Okay, these are collocations. Okay, they go together. If I say the word have, what do you think? Maybe have lunch, have dinner, have a shower. Okay, these are what we call collocations. So when we talk about teaching vocabulary, we mean teaching words, teaching phrases, teaching collocations. Okay, so when we start teaching vocabulary, the first step is always the same, and it's really, really important. We always try to elicit. So eliciting is basically trying to get your students to tell you the new word or phrase before you tell them. Okay, we're trying to assess what they already know. When we're teaching, we never want to go in and just tell them, oh, our new word is delighted. It means really happy. Okay, we never want to do that. We want to give them a chance to tell us the word before we tell them. One way of doing that is, of course, through using questions. Okay, so we could ask, for example, can any of you think of another word that means really happy? Okay, just a way of making them do the work. Think through the vocabulary they already know. Let them tell you before you tell them. We elicit for lots of different reasons, okay? We do it to give our students something to do in the class, okay? To engage them, to make them think. And because we make them think about it, the lesson content is more likely to be remembered. Okay, you know yourselves, when you think something through yourself, when you try to process it yourself, you are much more likely to remember it. As we said previously, the teacher can assess what students already know. And this can affect how we then go on to teach the word, whether they know it or if they've never heard it before in their life. In other words, it helps us to adjust the lesson to our students' needs. Okay. There are so many reasons to elicit. Okay, so it's really important that we do that as our first step when teaching vocabulary. For example, imagine the word we want to teach is I missed, in the sense of missed the bus. Okay, so we might go into class and say, oh, this morning, students, I was late. The bus left 5 minutes before I arrived at the bus stop. What happened? Then we would pause, we would give them some time, and hopefully one of the students will produce our sentence, like I missed the bus. Okay, maybe they know it, maybe they don't. Really, it doesn't matter as long as we give them the chance to tell us before we tell them. So this is a really nice example of using context to teach a word. We set up the context and hopefully the students are able to produce what we want them to produce. Okay, along with context, we often use pictures. Okay, pictures are a fabulous resource when it comes to eliciting meaning. As we see here, we have a picture of the boy and the woman running along, clearly missing the bus. Sometimes pictures are all we need, like if we're talking about a concrete object, like if we're teaching the word zebra. Okay, we show a picture of a zebra, right? It can't really be anything else. But sometimes when we're teaching more abstract words, like here, miss, you know, it's not really something we see as such. If we're teaching an abstract word like exciting, for example, you know, we might definitely use a picture as a way of launching into the word as we do here. But with the abstract words, we'll also follow up the pictures with maybe context or another method. Okay. So sometimes a picture is all we need for a concrete object, but sometimes a picture is just a launch pad to other elicitation methods. I wonder then, we've talked about using context, we've talked about using pictures. Can you think of any other methods that we might use to elicit? I'll give you 20 seconds to have a think and pop your answer in the chat box, please. Okay, yes, thank you very much, Arash and New Day Produce. You're absolutely right. Music, maybe videos. Yeah, we can present some words in context, maybe. Absolutely great ideas. Thank you, guys. Other methods we can use might be, well, role play, as we see up here. We can use a lot of facial expressions and body language. We can act, being shocked or being like super happy about something, or surprise. Okay, we can do a lot with miming body language expressions, etc. Synonyms, Deborah. Yes, that's an excellent answer. So instead of telling them the word we were teaching, we might give them synonyms. Again, this will get them thinking along the right lines. Similar to that, we can also give them antonyms or opposites. Okay, and that can be really, really helpful too. Another method that I use quite a lot when I'm teaching is drawing. Now, believe me, I am no Picasso. I'm a terrible artist, but it doesn't stop me trying. Okay, so again, coming back to the visuals, don't be afraid to draw something yourself if you think it'll help. So lots of methods for eliciting. And you'll find that different words will have different methods that will apply. So it's not like we can just ever use one method, okay? As part of the planning process, we're always thinking, what's the easiest way to convey this meaning and to elicit? Okay, great answers there. Thanks, guys. Now, when we're teaching vocabulary, there's a couple of things we've got to bear in mind. I know a lot of new teachers and maybe not so new teachers consider translation as an option. So if you speak the language that your students speak, you might go in and say, okay, this is the word in English and this is what it means in Spanish. Okay. Now, that's certainly the easy way out. Okay. But honestly, I'd really ask you to consider not using translation as a method. What are the disadvantages of translation? Well, when your students know that you will just feed them the word in their own language, they don't even try to get the word themselves a lot of times, okay? They just get used to you telling them and they don't really process the information themselves. It doesn't engage them as much if you just translate. Honestly, even if you're teaching beginners, there should be no real reason to translate, okay? As teachers, it's our job to consider the best way to convey meaning without translating. Another thing we always have to be really, really mindful of when teaching vocabulary, and indeed anything, is to grade our language. I wonder if any of you have heard of the CEFR. So the CEFR is the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages. And it basically says what students of each level of language learning should be able to do. So if we're teaching a very low level, perhaps A1, maybe beginner elementary, we've really got to use language that they will understand. Okay, we've got to grade our language to more or less suit their level. Okay. So if I was, for example, teaching the word excited, again, to an elementary class, I wouldn't come in and say, so I'm thinking of a word, synonyms for that word would be thrilled, okay, over the moon, okay, delighted, in anticipation, okay. I couldn't do that because they're elementary students, so they would not understand the words that I'm using to explain the new word. So that's why it's really important for us to grade our language. Okay, use language appropriate for the level that you're teaching. So try not to translate. Be super mindful of grading your language. And as we said, a lot of times context, visuals, etc. would be the way to go for conveying the meaning. Okay, let's take another look then at the idea of presenting our vocabulary in context. Context is key in any teaching you will do in the EFL classroom. Let's take a look at an example. Let's go back to miss the bus that we looked at earlier. Which of these examples is more likely to help students understand the meaning of miss the bus? Okay, here are our options. Option A, I missed the bus this morning. I arrived at the bus stop 2 minutes after it had left. Or option B, I was annoyed because I missed the bus. Okay, I'll give you 10 seconds just to look at those options. Think about which would be the best presentation in context and why. Yeah, good job, guys. Spot on. It is certainly answer A, isn't it? Hooray, well done. And we could say that this is the best option for lots of reasons. Mainly because it gives them the extra information they need. Okay, I was late. The bus left. Absolutely irrational. It's so clear. We're giving all the information we need. Option B just doesn't really do the job, does it? I was annoyed. Well, we could be annoyed for tons of reasons. Okay, it's not intrinsic to missing the bus. It could be applied to anything. Aside from that, maybe annoyed is too difficult a word for the group you're teaching. So you are all spot on. To use a nice phrase, spot on. Option A is definitely the best. Okay, so when we're teaching language then, when we're teaching vocabulary, there are three main things that we need to focus on in our teaching. And that is the famous MFP, meaning, form, pronunciation. Meaning is pretty obvious, right? We elicit, maybe they know. If they do, fabulous. If they don't, we explain. All we want to do is make sure they know the meaning in context and how it's used. We also focus a lot on form. So what's the word class? Is it an adjective? Is it a noun? Is it a verb? A lot of teachers, especially new teachers, they may be tempted to skip the form stage, but actually it's a really important element of helping the students anchor the new word in their head. If they know it's a verb, they know that it can be changed according to tense. If they find out it's an adjective, they know that it'll typically go before a noun. If it's a noun, it's also helpful to tell them, is it a countable noun or an uncountable noun? Because again, it'll help the students slot in that new word into their existing knowledge. So always address form. You can absolutely elicit form too by asking them, what do you think this is? Is it a verb? Is it a noun? Okay, let them do the work. Elicit everything. Pronunciation is also vitally important, not only for speaking, but for listening, so that when they hear other people use the word, they recognize it. In pronunciation, what are we dealing with? Well, we're dealing with how many syllables? Where is the stress? Okay. We're drilling. We model the word as teachers, the students repeat it. Okay, we do it as many times as we think is necessary. I would go minimum 3 times. Okay, but you may have to do more depending on the difficulties they might have with the sound. Okay, so for every new item of Lexis we teach, we do meaning, form, pronunciation. Then later on, we need to practice, right? We need to give them a chance to process the language, to use it. We would typically focus on accuracy first in perhaps a controlled practice task. And once we were happy that they had the accuracy down, then we could move on to fluency, maybe a freer practice task involving speaking perhaps. Okay, so, we're leading them down a very guided path. Okay, we're giving them what they need to know. We're letting them practice, and then we're letting them use it in their own words, in their own imagination. Okay, it's pretty important to follow the steps, because if we don't, we're likely to lose our students along the way. We've got to make sure they understand before we set them free to use it. Okay. So imagine then we've elicited, we've given them the meaning and context, we've done our form and phonology. The next step in vocabulary teaching would be to check understanding. So if you've already started on the online course, I'm sure you'll have heard a lot about concept checking questions. Sometimes it seems like it's all we talk about, but it's just so important. So concept checking, as it says here, it's a method used by a teacher to assess if the students understand the meaning and context. Okay, because there's no point moving on to the next word until we're absolutely certain that they've understood what we've taught. So concept checking questions, or CCQs for short, are vitally important. Let's go back to our sentence from before. I missed the bus. Which of the following options I'm about to show you is the most appropriate CCQ? A, do you understand? B, did you get to school on the bus? Or C, did you arrive on time? So like before, I'll give you 10 seconds to have a think and pop your answer in the chat box. Okay, we've lots of options here, mainly B's and C's. Well, actually all B's and C's. All right, let's take a look. So the answer here, the best CCQ would be option B. So well done, those of you who said B in the comments. So why is option A not suitable? Well, boof, do you understand? That's a terrible CCQ for many reasons. Mainly because when you ask that question, students will just say, yes, yes, I do understand. Yes, yes. Even if they don't, because who wants to admit that they don't understand something, you know? A lot of our students, especially kids and teenagers, you know, they'll care a lot what their peers think of them, and they will never admit that they don't understand. So always avoid A. I see lots of you chose C, and I can see why that's tempting for sure. But if we think of C, did you arrive on time? I mean, there's the possibility that maybe the person did. Maybe the person took a taxi. Maybe the person got a lift from a friend. Okay, it's possible that even though they missed the bus, they did still arrive on time, right? There is that room for doubt. But with option B, did you get to school on the bus? Well, we can say for sure that no, they did not get to school by bus. They missed the bus. Okay, for that reason, option B would be the best. But I can't see why you're tempted by C. Okay, but it's unfortunately not the best one here. And A, never. Okay. So later on in the questions and answers, if you have any other questions about CCQs, by all means ask me. Okay, we can talk about that more in the question and answer session. Okay, so we're going to revisit this point because really I can't stress how important it is, language grading. As we said, it's important when eliciting and concept checking vocabulary. So do you remember then what I said about language grading? What is it? Take a second and pop your answer in the chat box, please. Okay, yes, thank you, Deborah. Absolutely. It goes back to what we said about the CEFR. Absolutely, Arash, that's perfect. Language grading is speaking with students according to their vocabulary level. Okay, absolutely. Good job. Only use language your students already know, because if you explain new language using other unfamiliar words, they will lose track of the lesson. Guaranteed. Okay, so as the teacher, use language that your student of whatever level will understand. Okay. The CEFR then, as we said, stands for the Common European Framework of Reference. You'll see these codes all the time, okay, letter and number, especially when you start applying for jobs and when you're given a schedule for your new teaching job. You'll see A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2. Okay. It's a little confusing because we actually start with A, we don't end with A. So A1 would be beginner elementary, A2 up to pre-intermediate, B1 intermediate, B2 the start of advanced or upper intermediate, and then C1, C2 would be advanced and proficient. Okay, C2 proficiency is the highest level that any student can hope to achieve. Okay, very nice. So it's well worth keeping, keeping all of these codes in mind, because as I said, when you start applying for jobs and when you start teaching, you will need to use them all the time. Okay, it also helps you to grade your language appropriately. So let's do a practice. As we said, A1 is the lowest level, B's are higher and C's the highest. Take a look at these three sentences and see if you can match the levels A1, B1 or C1 to the sentences here. I'll give you a moment. Okay, so let's have a look, see if you are correct. So our sentence 1, I've been to Paris 3 times, would certainly be B1 level. Okay, we're using our present perfect tense here, that's moving up through the levels, so that is really quite an appropriate sentence for B1. Sentence 2, my name's Fernando, I live in El Bonito. We can see that that's a pretty basic sentence, isn't it? My name is, I live in, certainly suitable for elementary. Sentence 3, I'm not sure that you really understand this concept. Again, that's definitely for the higher levels, because it involves lots of words for expressing something that we could technically say in a much easier way. Okay, good job. I see lots of you in the comments were absolutely correct. Nice. Okay, so we've thought about grading our language really carefully. We've looked at ways of eliciting, giving meaning and context, focusing on form and phonology. We've concept checked. Everything is wonderful, right? We've gone through all the stages. Now, we've got to help our students record the new vocabulary. We've got to try and give them a system, because if not, it'll be in one ear, out the other, okay? There are lots of ways we can help to encourage our students to record new vocabulary. One of the best ways is to get them into the habit of using word cards or vocabulary notebooks. So if we do want them to use word cards, which, I do love a word card, I love a flashcard, what should we include for each word? Let's look at an example. So imagine we've just taught the word ghost. Look at all of the wonderful information we have here. We have the word. We have the fact that it's a countable noun. And we even have our IPA transcription. We have a definition. We have some word families, right? Ghostly, which is our adjective. Okay. We have some associated words, like a place which is believed to have ghosts is haunted. Okay. Again, we're building up that knowledge, that word association. Again, haunted, well, it's an adjective. Here's the IPA. The verb would be to haunt. It's a regular verb. We've got some examples down here. I don't believe in ghosts. Okay, the ghost of a broken-hearted woman is supposed to haunt the castle at night. You know, everything the students could possibly need to know about the word ghost is there. Okay, it's right there. And the fact that they've sat down and thought about all of this really helps consolidate it in their head. The higher the level of student you're teaching, the more information you can expect them to include in their card. Okay, this word card is really detailed, but you know, students of a lower level, maybe elementary, you know, they mightn't be expected. In fact, they definitely wouldn't be expected to include as much information in their word cards, but they could still do a simpler version. And the higher the level you teach, the more you can encourage them to include in their word card. Okay. You may be surprised to know that a student needs to know a new vocabulary item, or that a student needs to use a new vocabulary item between 5 and 16 times before they really know it. Can you believe that? So many times, right? So how do we expose them to words that many times? Well, we recycle the vocabulary, we bring it back in new forms. Okay, we teach it, we wait a few days, we bring it back again. Okay, we're constantly trying to recycle. So how do we recycle? How do we encourage students to use the new vocabulary? Well, so many ways. We can use word games, we can use crosswords. Word searches can be nice, especially for kids. I Spy for kids, they tend to really love that. We can provide matching activities, like match the picture to the word, match the word to the definition. And of course, we can develop speaking and writing activities that will encourage them to use all of the lovely new lexis they've learned in context. There are lots of ways we can do it. We can have a word box in our classroom where we add the new words at the end of every day, and maybe we spend 5 minutes at the beginning of every class just picking out random words. Maybe it's a word from last week, maybe it's a word from 2 months ago. Okay, but we give the students a chance to think, what did this word mean? And can I put it in a sentence, for example? So lots of ways, guys, that we can recycle vocabulary. Just always keep it in mind. Take every opportunity to do so, because the more you do it, the more the word will be consolidated in your students' minds. All right, so that's it from me for the moment. We've covered a lot of ground in the last 30 minutes. So now is your chance to ask me some questions. Anything you want to know about teaching vocabulary, whether it's something that we've mentioned in the presentation or whether it's something different. Okay, it's over to you. Ask me questions. Okay, I'm watching the chat box carefully, ready for those lovely questions. Okay, so we're getting in some really nice questions here. Hi, Kate. Thank you so much for your question. At a lower level, how does one approach the concept of IPA and beginner grammar? Well, Heike, this is not really related to the topic of vocabulary, but I guess the same principle is there. At lower levels, the IPA we might teach as part of our pronunciation section when teaching a new word. With low levels, I don't think I'd jump in with the IPA immediately, like full transcribed words. Instead, I might just start by picking out individual sounds if it's a sound that they have issues with. For example, if they are saying sop instead of shop, I might just take the opportunity to pick out the sh symbol, okay, when I'm dealing with the pronunciation section of the MFP. So I wouldn't go in full IPA, but I would definitely pick out relevant symbols and then, build it up gradually. With grammar, well, I think you talked about that in a previous webinar, but I know with vocabulary, as we said, the important thing is teaching them graded vocabulary. So vocabulary that is accessible to them and vocabulary that you can teach using appropriate language. Okay, so grade your input. Okay, thank you, Heike. Let's go with our next question. Okay. Ovi, I hope I'm saying that correctly. How can I grade my language, for example, to B1, when all of the definitions of the word that I find are B2 or above? Oh, Ovi, great question. Isn't this the eternal dilemma? This is the crux of grading our language. Okay. You'll often find that especially when you're pre-teaching vocabulary, there will be the odd word that will be too difficult. So you've got to go to the dictionary, find the definitions that's there, and then just using your own instinct, using your own words, your own knowledge, bring the level of the definition down. It's absolutely not easy, okay? But that is essentially the part of teaching and grading our language. I often find synonyms are the best here. For example, if we have the word ecstatic, okay, in the dictionary it might say, delighted. Okay, if you think delighted is too difficult, bring it down a notch. You could say really, really happy, okay, or incredibly happy. So you're kind of bringing the word down to its basic form and adding in reallys or veries, okay. That would be my advice really for grading. But the good news is the more you do it, the more you practice it, the easier it gets. So just distill your word down to its most essential meaning. Okay. Let's see. Next question, we have Arash. Is the eliciting part before warmer or during it? Interesting question, Arash. So often it's not really part of the warmer at all because, the warmer is at the beginning of a class. We use it to establish the topic. We're not really teaching vocabulary in the warmer, right? We're just setting the tone. So, for example, if we are teaching vocabulary about interviews, job interviews, for example, our warmer might just consist of a 5-minute discussion like, do you work? What jobs have you had? Okay, we're setting the scene. We're not teaching anything in the warmer. We're just doing some talking about the topic, warming our students up. Okay, the eliciting comes next in the presentation stage, or perhaps in the pre-teaching stage. Okay, so keep teaching out of the warmer. The warmer is just to establish the context. Okay, thank you, Arash. Good question. We have a really nice question here. Let me just bring it up. So we have a lovely question here from Linda. Can you give more information about vocabulary profilers? Yeah, absolutely. So a vocabulary profiler is a way of finding out what level the words in a certain text are. We use a really good one on the course called Vocab Kitchen. You'll find it in the assignment details, I'm sure. You copy and paste a text into it, and it'll tell you what are the A1 words, what are the B1 words, okay, what are the C1 words. This will be really useful for you when it comes to selecting words to pre-teach, because if your students are B1 level, you'll want to be pre-teaching the words that are maybe B2, C1, C2, because they're the words above their level that will block their understanding. So yes, as I said, Vocab Kitchen is the profiler we recommend on the course, but they're a wonderful, wonderful tool. Okay, thank you, Linda. Okay, we have a lovely question here. Let me just scroll down. I lost it. Okay, we have a great question here from Luke. Thank you, Luke. Do we not teach slang or jargon? Well, this is a tricky one, isn't it? Normally, with the lower levels, I wouldn't really recommend slang or jargon so much, because the lower level students don't tend to know enough vocabulary anyway to be able to tell if something is formal or informal. Okay, they wouldn't really know that it's not appropriate to say slang in certain contexts, whereas they have to use like another word in a different context. Okay, so I would tend to steer clear of it with the lower levels, apart from the really basic ones like, hello, we can say hi, okay, which again, it isn't really slang, but it's more informal. Or here in Ireland, I always teach my low-level students, we don't really say goodbye, we say see ya. Okay, again, it's kind of slang, it's informal, but see ya. So I might teach them the really basic ones that they'll come up across all the time. But I would be hesitant to teach low-level slang or jargon, because they mightn't be able to distinguish yet between, the different registers of formality. With the higher levels, absolutely. I mean, once they know enough language to know the correct ways to say things and how to express themselves, I would absolutely add in the elements of slang. If they're watching films, if they're listening to music, they'll hear a lot of slang anyway, and they'll naturally be really curious about it. So I would say, again, grade it. Grade the input. Perhaps avoid it if it's going to cause confusion, but if you think it's useful and it'll add to their knowledge, absolutely bring it into the higher levels. Okay, don't be afraid of it, basically. Okay. Let's see, what else have we got here? Let's scroll down a bit. We have more questions. Okay, New Day produce. How do I know what level people are? I don't think I fully understand this concept. Okay, again, this is a really good question. When you start teaching, you should absolutely be told what level your students are. So if you start working in a school, they will tell you, so today you're going to teach A1 students from 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock, and you'll teach B1 students from 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock. Okay, so there will never be a scenario, hopefully, where you walk into a classroom without knowing in advance what the level is. You should know the level, and then you can plan your lesson accordingly. Okay, and when you do start teaching, when you maybe start working in a school for the first time, it can be overwhelming. So make sure you ask that question. I'm sure the directors will tell you anyway, but make sure you have it clear what level they are. If you're not teaching through a school, if you're just finding your own students through maybe small ads or through word of mouth, there are lots of what we call level tests online. So you can download a level test. It's basically a series of questions, and judging by how many questions your students get correct or incorrect, you'll be able to look at the key and get an approximate level for them. Okay, so don't be afraid to go online and find some level tests to help you with that. Okay, but if you are working for a school, they'll tell you, don't worry. Okay, let's see, what else have we got here? Okay, Nafisa, is it necessary to ask students to learn new word definitions by heart? Is it useful? Yeah, this is a good question, Nafisa. I find that for some students, their brain just works in a way that they want to memorize everything. And, that's fine. If it works for them, excellent. But then you'll also find other students who, maybe they don't want to memorize definitions word for word. Maybe they're just happy with the concept, with having the concept of the word in their head. Maybe they don't need to be able to, spout out a word for word definition. I wouldn't push the idea, to be honest. I wouldn't emphasize the importance of learning a definition by heart. If the student wants to do that in their own time, absolutely. If that's the way they revise and they remember, fabulous. I would say just, follow the steps, elicit, do the meaning, form, phonology, concept check, practice, recycle. And if you've done that, that's wonderful. If they choose to memorize the definitions then by heart, good for them. Okay. But if they're just comfortable with the concept rather than a word for word definition, for me, that's okay too. Okay, excellent. All right, let's take a look. What else do we have? Okay. So Heike, you have an interesting point here. With assignment 1, a text, you need to look at certain words to understand the text. Cannot use them all. Timing. So I think you're talking here about pre-teaching. When you're pre-teaching the words in a text, remember, you just want to teach the ones that block understanding. Okay, you don't want to teach a word for the sake of it. Okay, so pick the ones that you think will seriously impede their understanding. Okay, choose the words that are above the level of the class. Okay, and then, as I think one of you pointed out earlier, you will then need to grade the definitions down. Okay, you will need to just take them down a notch, as you say yourself in the comments. Okay, simplify them slightly for B1 students. Okay, as for timing, pre-teaching, the stage, I would usually say the stage should be maybe about 10 minutes long, depending on how many words you're pre-teaching. Really, though, it depends. It depends on the difficulty of the words you're teaching and how many you're teaching. Okay, thank you, Heike. Okay, Nafisa, you have another nice question here. Can you introduce the reliable online level test? Well, there's not one I use in particular, Nafisa, to be honest. If you go on Google and just, type in level test EFL, you'll get lots of options and they're all quite different. So look through them and pick the one that you feel the most drawn to. Okay, it's not that there's one that's wonderful and loads of others that are terrible. Okay, the ones I've seen or the ones I've found by Googling are all pretty good. So it's a case of searching and finding the ones that you think are useful. Just make sure that you also get the key so that you can see how many correct answers they get and what level that would correspond to. Okay. So what other questions do we have here? Oh, hello, Dot Dot. That's a cute name. So A1 implies students have had some exposure to English. Typically, yes, maybe. And I know that's quite a vague answer, but A1 can kind of tend to encompass students who are at the beginning stage or maybe at the very beginning of elementary stage, up until maybe mid or high elementary stage. So there's a whole range there. I would say it's very unusual to find an A1 student who knows no English at all. Okay, just the way things have gone with globalization, for better or worse, A1 students will tend to know something. It could be even that they studied English in school 20 years ago and they haven't done anything since, but it just takes a little bit to reactivate their knowledge that they already have. Okay. I would say though, if you're planning an A1 lesson, just assume that they know quite little until you get to know the students and really gauge their level. Okay, so thank you, ... Great question. What else? Do we have some new comments? Okay. Valentina, is there a website with interactive vocabulary activities that you would recommend? And how would it be possible to use them in one-to-one online teaching? So again, Valentina, there's so much out there. I can't say that there is one site that I would recommend in particular. As I said, with the level test, it's really a matter of just searching for things yourself, okay, and finding the activities that you will like. I'm reluctant to recommend any in particular because, it's what works for me might not necessarily work for you. Okay, but Google, search. When you're Googling, looking for information on activities, always add in online teaching or online EFL, and that will bring you up all of the interactive activities. Okay, very nice. We have a nice question here from Linda. Again, thank you, Linda. What is the best way to teach vocabulary in a mixed level class? Will I ever be given a mixed level group to teach? Great question. In an ideal world, our students would all be, perfectly suited to the level that they're in. But in reality, of course, we do tend to get a bit of a mixture of students. So even within, say, B1 level, intermediate level, we might get some who are just starting intermediate level. We might have some who are halfway through intermediate level. We might have some getting towards the end. So within every level, there'll be a range of students with different abilities in our class. They'll all be more or less the same level, but with varying degrees. I would say the best way to teach vocabulary then is just to pick a nice wide spectrum. Okay. Try not to teach to the lowest knowledge. Okay, because then you risk alienating the students who are maybe a bit more advanced. At the same time, don't teach to the higher end of the spectrum either, because then the lower ones will feel bad that they don't tend to know anything because what you're teaching is quite difficult. So it's a nice idea to choose your language carefully, put in a mixture of perhaps easier, perhaps a little more difficult within that level. Okay, that way you're not alienating anyone. Okay, and as we said before, eliciting, give them the chance to tell you before you tell them. That keeps everyone included. The students at perhaps the lower end of the level will know some of the words, the students at the higher end will know others. So yeah, keep eliciting and choose your selection carefully. Okay, thank you so much, Linda. Okay, have I missed anything? Okay, we've got another few minutes, guys. So if you have any more questions, please put them in. Yes, New Day Produce Duolingo is really fun, isn't it? Yeah, I'm a fan. It's nice for practice, isn't it? It works well, I think, for vocabulary and phrases. Sometimes the context is a little bit strange. I think it's not always true to life, but as an extra tool for practicing language, yeah, it's really fun. Okay, have we got anything else? Let me just do one last look through the comments to make sure I haven't missed anything. Yes, Heike, there are lots of level tests, aren't there? Again, it's just a matter of looking through and finding one that you can really work with. Okay, you did produce, so judge who are the best and split into groups for activities. Oh, that's a really nice idea. Yeah, we could definitely go with mixed ability groups in the classroom. I would say if you do this, just be really careful that the stronger students don't dominate everything. Sometimes you might find that it's actually more practical to put the lower levels together, because now I say lower, we're still talking about, within, for example, an intermediate class. So they're not noticeably lower. Okay, but it can be more helpful to put the lower students together maybe because, they're on the same wavelength. They're not dominating each other. They're working away at the same level. And the same with the higher level students in the class. They're working to the same level. They're able to, fight their corner and and speak out and be heard. But that said, you might get a class in which mixed abilities work together perfectly well. It's very much student dependent on the type of group that you have. Okay, but yeah, that's a really good point. Okay, and I think we have time for just one more question. Let's go with Helene. Do students ever get confused by the different accents from their various international teachers? Does this ever affect a vocabulary class? Oh, Helene, you're asking the right person here, because I know when I taught abroad for 12, 13 years. I was often the first Irish teacher that they'd come across, and yeah, my accent definitely confused them for a while. I would say, though, it doesn't tend to be such an issue. Once they've got over the novelty of a new accent, it doesn't tend to be an issue. I would say, because, I have my Irish accent, I might pronounce things differently. I will always tell the student, but this is how you would hear it in Britain, or this is how they might say it in American English. Okay. For example, water, the thing you drink. In an Irish accent, it sounds very flat. We say water. So I teach them water. This is how I say it. But if you go to the UK, you might hear water, and they mightn't pronounce the R. If you hear it in American English, they might say water. It sounds like a D. But in my accent, you'll hear me say water. It doesn't mean that's the only correct way, but this is how I say it. So, accent really is not a problem at all, as long as you're also able to point out that not everybody will say it like that. There might be some variations according to where they go. And yeah, that tends to deal with that issue. Okay. Good question. How are you all finding my accent? Does it sound strange to you, or have you had a lot of exposure to an Irish accent? Type in the comments just for fun. Yeah, I agree, Helene. Accents are so fun. It's my favorite thing is just listening to people from all over the world speaking. I love it. I think it's fascinating. Okay, well, I think that's it, guys. That's our time up. Thank you so much for coming along. It would be wonderful if you could do me a favor and complete our exit survey. The QR code is on screen if you want to scan it, or else I've just put the link in the chat box. So whatever's easiest for you, we'd really appreciate it if you could give some feedback. All right, well, that's it. I think we're finished. Thank you all so much for coming. It was lovely to meet you all, and hopefully we'll see each other again soon. Okay, I will leave the survey link up for another 30 seconds and then end broadcast. Okay, goodbye guys. Have a great weekend.